You were just talking about exploration projects and things like that. What do you look for in an exploration project? I know, and this is a question for all of us, really. Well, maybe more for Nick, who's the ultimate expert in far off places. So the jurisdiction, the fact that it is not, say Canada or America or the Americas, it makes it sort of more interesting because you know that you're one of the first people to the party, so to speak, and so you can look into the future and think, okay, so if this is a good project, people will know about it later on when I'm already on board. But is there anything specifically that you look for as well, maybe in the geological sense? I mean, you know, each project is completely different to the next. How do you choose which one is more appealing to you?
Okay, I can do a quick answer to start off. So what's cool about geology, and yeah, I'm not a geologist. I rely on lots of help here, but that's the part that's actually pretty similar around the world. I mean, like you'll have geological, or you'll have the rocks actually be very similar in Canada or Australia to places like Africa or Scandinavia, or maybe some parts of South America. But that's what's cool, is that you can actually have more confidence in the rocks than you can on the geopolitical side. And
That's
I've
true.
mentioned this in the past, but like that's where, as long as you can get the help from people who actually have a lot more knowledge on the geology, the geopolitics, I don't trust anybody. I tell you, like, there's so many people who think they're geopolitical experts and they're nonsense, even the biggest guys. I will even go so far as to say that, like, people, they just, well, the geopolitical experts, they still put a blanket statement on Africa, and it really
Hmm.
frustrates me, because Africa is like one of the most diverse and not understood places. It is so different regionally, and even country by country. And so, I mean, just the really key thing is digging in and starting to follow. You don't need to know everything, but figuring out whether countries have positive or negative momentum. And I'll tell you, like, based this, it's hard to really be an expert here, but because there are no true experts, you can have a huge advantage if you can pick up those signals. And I feel like I have, to some degree, but that's for me, that's a big thing. I actually think, I saw a Twitter comment on this, and this is some food for thought. Thomas Kaplan, who's pretty well known in the industry. He runs a Electrum group, and he's at Minds and Money, and I saw a quote where he said, like, geopolitics or jurisdictional risk is the biggest influence on mining these days. I mean, this wasn't true 20 or 30 years ago, where most of the mines were in positive jurisdictions, and the differentiator was more the geology. In my opinion, I think he's absolutely right. Now, he has also publicly stated he only looks at the safer places. I think that there's two sides to this. There's one, if you want to be really safe, just stick with the good jurisdictions, and you can still find undervalued stuff there. But I think you really need more of the expertise on the geology. But when you look at these far off places, I mean, to what he said, some of them are so undervalued that, as long as you get the handle on the geology, and most importantly, like, sometimes these things, they're not even discovered, or, I mean, they're not there hasn't been a discovery yet, but there's artisanal miners, like, I mean, whether it's Africa, or actually Africa more than anywhere else in the world. I mean, you're actually really much more de-risked from the geology standpoint, because there hasn't been modern exploration techniques, but there's tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, like, digging things out of the ground. Like, the gold is there, or something else is there, but what you really need to focus on is the geopolitics. So I'm just pounding home the point. It's like the focus is completely shifted. I mean, geopolitics and geology, they kind of sound the same, but they're completely different skill sets to understand. And so that's what I've come to understand, is you really need to get the handle on the geopolitics when you're going to these far off places.
I think this is a fun question, so I'd like to take a stab at it. First off, I think where you go, it depends on your risk appetite, because there are investors out there who really don't want to leave their own backyard. And I think, for the most part, jurisdictions such as Canada or Nevada, that's kind of the de facto standard, where people go for exploration if they want to feel safe with, people say zero geopolitical risk, for the most part, because it's kind of a known entity. Having said that, though, there are, like, geopolitical issues, it's pretty much unpredictable stuff. I'm not suggesting investors don't pay attention to that kind of thing, but there are also instances, and I guess the best example in the last year is a story like Rubicon, which was in Red Lake District, which is kind of a premier gold district and the safest place you can be. And that's a story that kind of blew up in investors' faces as well. So my point is basically there's no guarantees with mining, right? Even when you think you're in the best possible area, it's like that's Red Lake, that's what Goldcorp is. So the gold is obviously there. There's no, without a shadow of a doubt, Rubicon is going to be able to develop this project and this mine. But it just goes to show how tricky this business is, right? Like even when you think you know something for sure, sometimes you really don't. So with that said, if you were to ask me where I would want to go with, exploration and finding these, the riches in these far off lands, then I think we'd all agree, and we're all on the same page here. And you kind of want to go, like Nick mentioned, where they have found gold before in the past. And a good example of that is, West Africa and the Birimian Greenstone Belt, right? If you look at an area like Burkina Faso, a lot of these companies now that are in production, I mean, imagine, maybe a decade ago or something, and you were getting into these exploration stories. You had to put money into just like Roxgold, Orezone, Endeavor Mining. I mean, there's so many companies out there that are developing gold projects. And I've got some plays in Burkina. Last year I got into like True Gold was just, one example. And Nick and I are in Sarama Resources right now. And one of the questions is why would you go there? And that's the obvious answer, is because they found so much gold already there. It's a very prospective belt for gold. And I when I'm looking at these plays, I like to kind of focus on really simple projects. That's kind of the main reason I got into like a company like True Gold, where it's like this really shallow surface oxide gold. That's it's a simple heap leach project or something. Relatively modest capex. Because like just back to the Rubicon example, you kind of learn if sometimes when you go to really complex geology and mineralization stuff, these narrow vein systems or something, they come and go. I mean, sure, you might make that argument where it's a safe jurisdiction, but if the geology is tricky, then in a sense that's something else you're battling with. So in that case, with the benefit of hindsight, it's investors might have been better off just going after the really simple, straightforward geology where it's kind of a no-brainer. Again, like Nick mentioned, in certain regions with a lot of artisanal mining, it's like the gold is obviously there. People have been digging it out for many years or decades. So you just really need a company to go in there and drill at depth or something and expand the resource. Another, like for example, a region I like is Guyana right now, because if you look at the geological setting and structures, it's very similar to West Africa. But that's like this region where there's a lot of multi-million ounce deposits that have been put into production or they're in development, and they're right next door to Venezuela, which is a little more explored. There's a lot of really massive deposits there. So that saying, like when you're looking for gold, you want to be an elephant country because you're going to increase your odds for success of finding something. So I've got some companies, early stage exploration companies in Guyana for that reason alone, because the geology is that promising, and there's this track record of drilling out these multi-million ounce gold deposits. So that's kind of how I do it. I try to keep things simple. With that said, I do have a higher degree of risk tolerance, I guess. I don't really, let the geopolitical stuff really get in the way too much. I mean, I know that stuff's important, to keep tabs on.